welcome to another Classic Briefs Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into one of the most epic, legendary revenge stories ever put to paper, the Count of Monte Cristo. Now, you probably know it as the ultimate thriller, right? The blueprint for getting even. But we're going to dig into where its real power actually comes from. Because, honestly, this isn't just some basic adventure story about payback. It's a profound, really dark investigation into justice, identity, and the very limits of the human soul.
So let's start off with a pretty heavy moral question, something to keep in the back of your mind. After a vicious betrayal completely destroys your life, can revenge actually give that life back? We're about to trace a hero's absolute, terrifying descent into darkness, and his unbelievable rebirth. To really appreciate just how far he falls, we first need to look at who he was before everything went wrong. Picture this. It's 1815, we're in Marseille, and Edmond Dantès is 19 years old. He's a highly capable, strapping young sailor who just got named captain of his ship. He's incredibly hopeful, almost painfully innocent, and on the verge of marrying Mercedes, the love of his life. He's completely trusting, and honestly, because he's just so deeply loyal and good-natured, he has absolutely no clue about the toxic jealousy that's brewing all around him. Okay, so how does a totally good man lose literally everything? Well, it takes a perfect storm of cowardice and ambition from three very distinct men. First, you've got Danglars, who is just eaten alive by professional jealousy because Edmond got that captain promotion. Then there's Fernand Mondego, fueled by pure romantic rivalry. He wants Edmond's fiancée for himself. And finally, Gerard de Villefort, the deputy prosecutor. This guy knows for a fact that Edmond is innocent, but he throws him to the wolves anyway out of pure political self-preservation, just to protect his own father from a treason scandal. It's jealousy, ambition, and cowardice combining perfectly to utterly destroy an innocent man's future. Listen to the chilling, calculated logic behind their plot in this quote from Danglars. He says, "Absence severs as well as death. And if the walls of a prison were between Edmond and Mercedes, they would be as effectually separated as if he lay under a tombstone." That is dark, right? They draft a simple letter accusing Edmond of being a Bonapartist traitor, and through that single, weaponized lie, Edmond's bright, beautiful future is just stolen in an instant. Edmond is dragged into the suffocating, pitch-black darkness of the Château d'If, an inescapable island fortress. Let's walk through this timeline because it's brutal. In 1815, he's unjustly imprisoned. 17 months in, a government inspector actually visits, but Edmond is simply forgotten, literally buried alive in the bureaucracy. By year 4, he's basically starving himself, ready to just die of despair, when out of nowhere he meets the mad Abbé Faria. And finally, at year 14, he pulls off this terrifying daring escape by swapping places with a corpse and getting thrown into the freezing sea inside a dead man's burial sack. That agonizing crawl of time in the dungeon slowly killed the young, hopeful Edmond. 14. I really want us to dwell intensely on this number for a second. 14 stolen years. Just imagine the crushing, suffocating weight of that. Years of his youth, of sunshine, of loving Mercedes, of taking care of his aging father, all of it entirely stripped away, leaving him to rot alone in the dark. It was that exact weight, that completely unimaginable theft of time, that forged an unbreakable vow of vengeance in his mind. Part 1. Rebirth in the dungeon. The mad priest who changed everything. So, the mad priest, Abbé Faria, changes absolutely everything for Edmond. And the funny thing is, Faria isn't mad at all. He's this brilliant scholar who, in a stroke of completely absurd irony, accidentally tunneled into Edmond's cell after digging the wrong way for years. Over their time together, Faria gives Edmond these three multifaceted gifts: a massive education in languages and science, the cold, deductive logic to figure out exactly who set him up, and then, right before Faria dies, a map to the limitless Spada treasure. So Faria didn't just give him a fortune, he gave him the deadly, sharpened intellect required to actually wield it. Look at the profound night and day difference between these two identities. You had the old Edmond Dantès, innocent, trusting, and totally powerless. But after escaping that prison, claiming the treasure, and completely reinventing himself, he emerges from the sea as the Count of Monte Cristo, cynical, cold, calculating, and seemingly omnipotent. He is almost like a mythological figure now. He's completely detached from his former humanity. Part 2. The architecture of vengeance. Patience as a weapon.
You know what makes this story so incredibly thrilling? It's that the Count doesn't just escape, run straight back to Marseille, and stab his enemies in a fit of rage. No way. He waits 10 more years. He travels, he learns, he prepares. He builds an arsenal of limitless wealth, masterful disguises like Sinbad the Sailor, the priest Abbé Busoni, Lord Wilmore, and infinite patience. His whole strategy is purely psychological. He uses his vast resources to set elaborate traps, basically exposing their hidden corruption and letting his enemies totally destroy themselves through their own greed, pride, and unpunished past crimes. This quote here perfectly captures his terrifying new mindset. He casually tells a friend, "I would fight for such a cause, but in return for slow, profound, eternal torture, I would give back the same, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth." You see, his 14 years of agonizing suffering, they demand an equal, agonizing retribution. To him, a quick death is way too merciful for the men who ruined his life.
And to justify all this absolute destruction he's handing out, he leans super heavily on the concept of providence. Providence being the protective care of God. The Count literally elevates himself above human law here. He genuinely believes his miraculous escape, his survival against literally all odds, and his immense, almost ridiculous wealth are a direct mandate from God. He sees himself as an earthly vessel for divine retribution, chosen to step in and punish the wicked where the human justice system completely failed.
Part 3. The Moral Abyss. The Price of Playing God. Now here is where things get really messy. This perfect, thrilling justice he's executing, it starts to bleed into a dark, totally uncontrollable obsession. Let's contrast these two ideas for a second. Justice is objective, right? It restores balance and it has strict limits. Revenge, on the other hand, is completely subjective. It exists only to inflict pain, and it becomes totally all-consuming. As the Count's elaborate, devastating traps finally spring shut on Danglars, Fernand, and Villefort, entirely innocent people, we're talking spouses and children, start getting caught in the crossfire. The destruction spirals totally out of control, moving way beyond the simple justice he initially set out for. Which brings the Count face to face with a terrifying realization. By letting his pain and his burning desire for retribution become his entire identity, he risks becoming exactly as morally corrupt as the monsters who destroyed him in the first place. That is the supreme danger of his God complex. Living purely for vengeance threatens to burn away whatever tiny scrap of humanity he might still have left. He's forced to ask himself, am I still doing God's work, or have I just become a monster creating more misery? But, before that realization completely takes over, we do get these incredibly dramatic, cinematic confrontations. Just imagine the sheer, heart-stopping terror when he finally corners his betrayers and strips away the whole myth of the Count. I am he whom you sold and dishonored. I am he whose father you condemned to die of hunger. I am Edmond Dantès. Revealing his true identity, a name they were certain was dead and buried decades ago, is the ultimate crushing blow. It literally shatters their reality. Part 4. The Legacy of Mercy. Knowing when to stop. If the story just ended there, with bloodshed and ruin, it wouldn't be the masterpiece it is today. The true lesson kicks in when the Count finally looks around and sees the profound terror and collateral damage he's unleashed. He realizes he absolutely must stop playing God. His ultimate lesson, perfectly wrapped up in his famous final words to a young friend, is to wait and hope. Edmond's final and honestly hardest trial is recognizing his own human limits, finding the immense, agonizing strength to actually show mercy, and finally letting go of the past to rebuild his own fractured soul. It's really easy to root for revenge from the sidelines. We all do it. But I want to leave you with this. If you possessed the Count's absolute power and his limitless wealth, would you actually have the strength to let go of your pain and show mercy? The Count of Monte Cristo still matters so much today because it understands exactly why revenge is so tempting, but also why living only for it can turn a wounded person into something almost as dangerous as the people who broke them. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.